When you're looking at Microsoft, what sticks out to you?
Yeah, we really did a bit of a deep dive into their Teams product because that's really what's gotten the most traction for them during the coronavirus shutdowns and lockdowns. And one of the things we looked at was just sort of that macro consumer behavior of where are people working now? They're working at home, but how likely is that to become permanent? And so we looked into a chart of that, people talking about actually moving their work from home situation from a temporary thing to a permanent thing. And what we found was pretty impressive. You can, you can see on the chart that we shared that this started in March, of course, when the lockdowns began, but then it's maintained a real strength throughout. And then a lot of companies started announcing that they would allow permanent work from home status, and a lot of small businesses moved to that model as well at the beginning of May. And what this shows us is that for Zoom, Slack, Microsoft, and especially the Microsoft Teams product, this is probably a trend that is here to stay. Clearly not going to have the explosive growth that it had on the back of a essentially economic shutdown that forced people to stay home, but there is resurgence there. There is, maintenance of very high levels. And there's kind of this new economy blooming. There's this new way of working that the Microsoft Teams product is very well suited to serve.
Yeah, Andy, this is such an awesome conversation that we're having here because this is like Business 101, isn't it? You got companies like Slack and Zoom, right, that are innovators in this space, but here comes all the big boys. They see a point and they see somewhere where they can put resources, and now you've got, the behemoth Microsoft entering this space. And I love the quote out of Slack's CEO, and he says about Microsoft, they want to kill us. They basically want to put us out of business. And Microsoft, they carry a pretty big bat. And this is a pretty interesting, they've got teams of people creating this product and making it special. And just this week, they came out with going from 9 people on the screen to 49 people on the screen at one time. So, competition is entering this space and entering it really quickly. And here come the big boys to play in this space. So watching this play out is really incredible. And, it's one of my favorite. It's my new geek hobby is to watch how young companies interact with big companies in terms of competition.
Yeah, well, when we zoom into into that competition, we look at Slack versus Microsoft Teams. When we look at Zoom versus Microsoft Teams, of course, a rising tide lifts all boats, and there's room for plenty of winners here. But one thing that does stick out to us is that Microsoft Teams, it carries a big stick. There's a lot of companies that are on Microsoft as a enterprise solution that are putting people onto the Teams product. But when you compare it to Slack in terms of the user's happiness or the consumer happiness, what we found is that the more people use the Teams product, the less they like it. And that's not true of Slack. That's not true of Zoom. They're both outperforming Microsoft Teams in terms of how much they're delighting that customer, which gives us, some shakiness in terms of how well they will retain that customer as people go to a permanent solution at home. Your company tells you to do something, you're probably going to do it. So those relationships that Microsoft already has with massive companies matter in a big way. But when it comes down to user choice, we're starting to see real indications that Slack and Zoom, at least at the current moment, are preferred by customers and preferred by users.
Andy, first off, really, really interesting to Kevin's point. And it's a really difficult task, I believe, to unpack Microsoft because it does so many different things. I mean, you look at the company profile Just those three sectors are so different. They're intertwined, and they're all growing at such an incredible clip. The productivity in business, the intelligent cloud, and of course, the more personal computing. This is really a powerhouse of a company. Everyone knows that. We see the performance that it's had over the last few years, and it's only strengthened kind of that narrative around this. But I love this conversation. We talked a little bit about this with Landon yesterday, this idea that Zoom and Slack, which I'm sure we'll talk about tomorrow, they have this bit of a gap on user experience, but don't they need to maintain that? Because to your point, Microsoft has existing relationships, but the one thing that sticks out, even just from what we've said here, Microsoft can go to company A and say, we can give you everything, one contract. If you want Zoom and Slack and anything else that maybe has a better user experience, that's several contracts possibly. And one thing is, I would assume Microsoft might be able to compete a little bit better on price because of that, but also just it makes it easier.
Yeah, it makes it easier, and what has to happen then is, Slack and Zoom have to continue making it easier for the user, so that there's this conflict within these large companies. That's how they'll win the deals, and they know it. They know that they have to outperform on the features that they deliver. They're not going to try to have all of the document sharing, all of the cloud computing, all the things that Microsoft does so well. They know that they're in a lane that they want to win. And they're doing a very good job of that so far. They have to maintain a lead in terms of functionality and customer experience. So far, they're doing that. And so the reason why we bring these charts up is you want to talk about, everybody wants to talk about Microsoft Teams as a threat to these companies. And while that's true, you can also see in today's report from Zoom, probably in the report from Slack coming up, that they're doing very well. And they're delighting their customers, and that's what they have to do. And what we'll watch for is, if Teams closes this gap or even gets a lead in terms of consumer happiness, then that's when these companies that have single feature experiences like Slack and Zoom, essentially, that's when they become very, very vulnerable, and you have to start to question their growth prospects. But as of this point, you really don't have to. Other than the kind of big 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is Microsoft, kind of beating down the doors of these corporations, like you're saying, and saying, take this as part of your package. We'd rather these guys not exist. That's a tough spot to be, but so far Slack and Zoom are responding really well in terms of how well they're treating their customers and making it fun and easy to use their products.
So two things, Andy. We talked with Landon yesterday about Zoom. Some of the similar stuff came up, but your chart of this move to a permanent work from home environment. My question to Landon, I'm going to pose the same one to you, because we love your guys' take as entrepreneurs, as people who are looking at the data, and as generally, I think you guys are smart guys, but when I look at this and I see these data points and I see that this pie is growing for this space, I can understand that. I can see how they can all be winners. But somewhere's got to be a loser, right? Is it commercial real estate? Is it hotel and travel? Is maybe less movement towards conventions and things as things become more virtual? Where is the second and third order effect happening on the negative side as a result of these trend shifts?
Well, I mean, I think you nailed it. You really, you called me a smart guy, but I don't have to be a smart guy to figure this out. If you're looking at commercial real estate in the heart of Manhattan right now and weighing that against activating Microsoft Teams or Slack and Zoom, the decision has become very, very easy over the course of the past months and over the course of the past few days. I think that there's no doubt about that. I think that there's a rising tide that is growing in terms of its strength, and all of these companies can win out of this and will, and the losers definitely are those who they replace, and that is physical locations. Somewhat travel, hotel, I think, is probably there, although I think that'll bounce back quicker than someone deciding to sign a 6-year lease on a block that was just, that has had the last few months shut down and that was just ransacked by people who are upset with their local government and with things like that. So I think those choices are really easy for businesses to make, and they'll continue to make those. And it's going to be, more of who wins bigger, I think, when you look at Slack and Zoom and Microsoft Teams. It's more of who wins bigger because clearly all of them have a massive tailwind behind them.